It occurs to me that when we were saying our prayer for Sharon, and I included Nan, I think I said Phil.
You did.
Deepest apologies. God thankfully knows what I'm saying if my mouth doesn't work. But yes, it was Nan had an accident, was broadsided, going home from the hospital. Yeah, so she's all bruised up. This has been a tough week for our faith family. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
When Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, who comes under the cover of night to talk with Jesus, he tells him that just as Moses lifted up the serpent, the Son of Man, I must be lifted up. We used to joke about this. I love snakes on a stick. The story of that comes from Numbers 21, and it is the people of the Israelites, surprise, surprise, disobey God. Surprise, surprise. So God sends fiery serpents to bite them, and it kills them. People are dropping faster than folks from the coronavirus. And Moses appeals to God, and God says, fashion a serpent out of bronze, put it up on a stick, and people who have been bitten look up at it and are cured, and we think magic. It is directing them to look up to God. They're constantly looking down on themselves and on each other. They're constantly looking at each other, pointing fingers at each other. They're looking everywhere other than where they should be looking, which is to God. Fast forward many hundreds of years, and people are so busy looking down, looking at each other, pointing fingers, etc., that they're not looking up to God. And it takes Jesus hanging on a cross to get us to look up. There's so many frustrations in this world. There's so many things stirring us up. So many things to worry about. So many things that just kind of grate on our nerves. Several years ago, I was coming home from a remote camp up above Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. I was flying home to Washington. I'd already been on 3 airplanes, a long taxi ride, and I had the last leg was a 2-hour ferry ride crossing the strait from Victoria, Canada to my home in Port Angeles, Washington. And I was on the last ferry of the night, and I was tired, and I was dragging. And all I wanted was to sit up on the upper deck under the stars in heaven and have peace. And I made my way up to the top, and I sat down, and wouldn't you know it, here came a young couple with 3 children, all under the age of 5. And I'm telling you what, screaming, wailing, worse than fingernails on a chalkboard, and wouldn't you know, but they sat down about as far from me as Joe is sitting from Randy. And I gritted my teeth, and I prayed, because I'm a good Christian person. I prayed, God, shut those kids up!
Not very nice. Not very nice to do that.
She's right, because
Not right.
God gave me an answer. One word. Now, I'm not going to tell you I heard a male voice or a female voice voice in my head or anything like that, but I heard it in my soul and I heard it in my heart. One word answer. Bears. Bears. And God and I do have a relationship enough where I understood bears. You see, I have a terrible time when I fly, my ears just get plugged up, horrible. And gum gets tiring. So I always carry gummy bears. And I knew that I had gummy bears in my pocket. So I pulled out those gummy bears and I looked at the dad and I said, would they like some gummy bears? And he looked at me. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Mom, who had come up, Mom had dumped screaming, probably, I don't know, 20-month-old or so in Dad's lap and said, I'm going downstairs. So Dad looked at me with these swollen eyes, so tired. He goes, well, big sister, she's already over at my place. And he goes, why not? So all three of those kids are taking gummy bears. Well, that pretty much dries up screaming, because you can't scream. Have anybody ever tried to chew a gummy bear and scream at the same time? You can't do it. So, and then I knew the next part was telling them the story of the three bears. Now, not the three bears that everybody else tells, because I was an expert babysitter when I was young, and I have a version of three bears in the foxy chick Goldilocks. And they order pizza, etc. And so, three kids curled up in my lap, eating the last of my gummy bears, listening to this wacko story about the three bears. And as we were pulling into Port Angeles, into the port, and the horn sounded, the story ended, and to my surprise, there was all this applause. Because what I hadn't realized was all I cared about was shutting those kids up. Everybody else on that upper deck had also wanted a peaceful, quiet journey home. And with the children quiet, and this silly little story that was kind of familiar and not familiar, they were applauding God's grace. God allowed us a peaceful journey. And that's when I was reminded of the last bears. I can bear anything through the grace of God. God will allow us to bear anything that we face in this world, whether it be the coronavirus, whether it be a change in jobs, whether it be a change in the leadership of a church, whether it be change in musicians, which I think is awesome. We have a great musicians. We can bear everything if we are reminded to look up, to look to God. Yes, Sarah, my prayer was not nice. Please, God, shut those kids up. But the prayer was answered. Even if it wasn't prayed in the nicest of manners, it was answered. But it was also answered through, no, Laura, you have the ability and the grace to handle this because I am with you. We have the ability and the grace to weather an interim transition period in this church. You have the answer in front of you if we remember to look up to God for God's guidance. Today is International Women's Day. And I look through this church, and now today it's pretty even, but a lot of times I look out and there's a lot more women than men. Women bear children. Women bear the brunt of a lot of stuff in the workplace that I think, generally speaking, until the Me Too movement, people weren't even aware of. I'm not going to say that men weren't aware of, because I think a lot of women weren't even aware of how much that was going on. Women bear the brunt of the responsibility of the family, making sure the kids are fed, clothed, making sure everybody has what they need to get through. Women are strong. I believe women are equally as strong as men. Does anybody want to argue and disagree with that? Because I will. Okay. This church was founded by a strong female leader. And I know that looking up to God, and with a reminder that whether we go with gummy bears or not, we still always go with God, that we together are going to build a lasting, amazing, wonderful tribute to that beginning foundation. Amen?
Amen.
And you know what? Gummy bears still taste good.